The dust devils on Main Street looked like ghosts. They swirled red dirt against the tired wooden storefronts of Redemption Creek, a town where secrets died quick and gossip traveled faster than a train. The sun was a hammer, beating down on the crooked roofs until the shingles warped and split. Margaret Rose Hayworth knew all about that heat. She pulled her bonnet low over her face, stepping out of Garrett's general store with a basket of flour and beans. She moved fast, sticking to the shadows, trying to avoid the little groups of townswomen who gathered like vultures outside the hat shop. But you can't outrun whispers. "There she goes!" The voice was sharp as a needle. Mrs. Adelaide Pritchard didn't even bother to lower it. Poor creature. Such a shame what happened to her. "Shame indeed," her friend Mrs. Constance Miller added. Her voice was that sickly sweet mix of pity and satisfaction. Though one must wonder if it wasn't divine providence. She was always too proud, that one. Too pretty for her own good. Margaret's jaw went tight, but she kept walking. It had been 3 years since the fire, 3 years since everything changed. But in Redemption Creek, 3 years was yesterday. She could feel their eyes on her back. She could feel them studying the way she held her head, the careful angle she used to hide the left side of her face, the scar. It was a twisted rope of pink and white flesh that ran from her temple down to her jaw, pulling the corner of her eye and her mouth into a permanent, grim smile. The doctor from Fort Worth did what he could, but some things, once broken, can't be fixed. What was once the prettiest face in the county now turned stomachs. She was 17 when it happened, young, dumb, and in love with a traveling man who promised her the whole world. They'd been meeting in secret in the barn. He knocked over a lantern trying to get away when her father came looking. He ran. She got trapped when a beam fell. Her father pulled her out, but the flames had already taken their price. "Miss Hayworth." The voice stopped her cold. Samuel Hutchinson stood in the doorway of his father's bank, his pale eyes crawling over her like spiders. He wore his usual black suit. Even in this heat, his thin mustache waxed into 2 sharp points. "Might I have a word?" "I'm in a hurry, Mr. Hutchinson." She shifted the basket, trying to angle her body away from him. "My father needs—" "Your father is precisely whom I wish to discuss." He stepped closer, and she smelled the sick sweetness of his hair pomade. "His debts continue to mount. The bank has been patient, more than patient, but our charity has limits." Her stomach clenched into a hard knot. She knew about the debts. Her father hadn't been the same since her mother died, and the fire just broke what was left of him. The ranch was dying. The few cattle they had left were barely enough to keep them from starving. However, Hutchinson's voice dropped, trying to sound seductive, "I might be persuaded to extend more favorable terms, if you were to reconsider my previous offer." His offer? He called it marriage. She knew it was slavery. He wanted a servant he could own, a broken thing so grateful for his attention she wouldn't complain. 3 times he'd asked. 3 times she'd said no. "My answer remains unchanged, Mr. Hutchinson." His face went dark. "You ought to consider your position more carefully, Miss Hayworth. You're hardly in a situation to be particular. No decent man in this town would have you, not as you are. I'm offering you respectability, security. You should be grateful." The words were stones, and every single one hit its mark. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze for the first time. She saw him flinch when the sunlight hit her scar. "I'd rather starve, Mr. Hutchinson." His voice turned ugly. "That can be arranged. Your father has until the end of the month. After that, the bank will be forced to take action." He spun on his heel and disappeared back into the bank's cool darkness. Margaret stood in the street, her hands trembling. She could feel the eyes of half the town on her. Head high, she forced herself to walk toward her father's old mare. Every step felt like wading through thick mud. The whole town was a blur of judgment. She was almost to her horse when a group of cowboys stumbled out of Murphy's saloon, loud with afternoon whiskey. Jake Morrison, the foreman from the Double K Ranch, saw her first. "Well, well, afternoon, Miss Margaret." He tipped his hat with a fake smile, and his friends snickered. Heard old Hutchinson's still sniffing around. He must be desperate for a woman if he's willing to overlook. Well, the other men howled with laughter. One of them, a young hand she didn't know, squinted at her face. Sweet Jesus, Jake. You weren't kidding. That's one hell of a... That's enough. Her voice was steadier than she felt. Good day, gentlemen. Gentlemen, Jake slapped his thigh. Hear that, boys? We're gentlemen now. He stepped closer, his breath thick with whiskey. You used to be real friendly, Margaret. Remember those church socials? You danced with me once. Course, that was before you got yourself all burned up over that traveling man. The shame burned hotter than any fire. Everyone knew. Everyone in this cursed town knew her secret. Her stupidity. Her punishment was written right across her face for the whole world to see. Let me pass. Nobody's stopping you. But he didn't move. Just making conversation. Not often we get to talk to the town's most famous spinster. What are you now, 20? 21? Getting a bit old even without the decoration. She pushed past him, and her basket hit his arm. Beans scattered across the dusty street. She knelt to gather them, her bonnet falling forward to hide her face as their laughter rained down on her. Leave 'em, Jake said. Consider it payment for the entertainment. Her fingers scraped the dirt. These beans were the difference between eating tonight and not. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. A shadow fell over her. She looked up, expecting more torment, but it was just a boy, maybe 12 years old, kneeling beside her, helping her pick up the beans. Thank you, she whispered. The boy just shrugged. My ma says you helped birth my little sister when the doctor was drunk. Says you've got healing hands. Before she could answer, a woman's voice sliced through the air. Timothy, get away from there this instant. The boy dropped the beans in her basket and scrambled away. His mother grabbed his arm, shooting Margaret a look of pure disgust, as if her scars might be contagious. Margaret finished gathering what she could and stood up, her knees dusty, her soul in tatters. She pulled herself into the saddle and rode out of town, the whispers following her like ghosts. The cautionary tale. The girl who flew too close to the sun. The scarred bride that no man would ever want. She was damaged goods, a blight on the town's good name. Once she was clear of the town, she finally let the tears come. They traced a hot path down her cheeks, following the familiar twisted line of her scar. It was like pouring salt in a wound that would never, ever heal. Back at the ranch, her father was on the porch, a bottle beside him, staring into nothing. The house looked worse than ever, the fence posts leaning like tired old men. Papa, she called, I'm home. He turned, his eyes dull with whiskey and sorrow. Did you get the supplies, my girl? Yes, Papa. She didn't mention the beans. She didn't mention Hutchinson's threat. Tomorrow was soon enough for that. As she unsaddled the mare, she caught her reflection in the water trough. The scar was angry in the fading light, a permanent reminder of one foolish night. She touched it gently, remembering the girl she used to be. That girl believed in love. She believed in escape. This woman knew better. This woman knew that some mistakes follow you forever, and some women are just destined to be alone. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and dust. A coyote howled in the distance, a lonely, defiant sound against the dying light. Margaret squared her shoulders and went inside. She would survive tonight, just like she'd survived every night since the fire. It was all she had left. But something else was riding the wind that night. A change, a stranger. And he was heading straight for Redemption Creek. He rode into town when the heat was so bad it made the air shimmer. His horse was a dusty black, tough and lean, the kind that could run for days. The man sat easy in the saddle, like he was born there, his hat pulled low. Jack Calloway had seen 100 towns just like this one. They were all the same. Wooden buildings, baking in the sun, suspicious faces peeking from behind curtains. The same smell of desperation and dust. He'd been riding for 3 days, putting distance between himself and a whole mess of trouble back in San Antonio. He scanned Main Street with a practiced eye, the kind of eye that could spot danger a mile off. A saloon, a bank, a general store, a church. Civilization, clinging to life on the edge of nowhere. He had money in his saddlebags, earned on a cattle drive, enough to rest for a bit, find some work, then move on. He'd learned a long time ago not to stay in one place for too long. Men like him collected enemies like burrs on a blanket. At the livery stable, an old Mexican named Carlos sized him up. How long you staying, senor? Few days, maybe a week. Jack swung down from his horse. He needs grain and a good rub down. See, I take good care of him. Carlos ran a hand along the horse's neck. You want a boarding house? Mrs. Daniels runs a clean place. Doesn't ask too many questions if a man pays in advance. Jack gave a thin smile. That'll do. Mrs. Daniels was a widow with eyes as sharp as broken glass. Week's rent in advance, she said, looking him up and down. No women in the rooms, no gunplay, and no drinking past midnight. Break the rules and you're out. No refunds. Yes, ma'am. Jack counted out the coins. Where can a man find ranch work? The Double K is always hiring, though Jake Morrison is particular. Or Tom Garrett at the general store might know of something. She studied his face. You running from something, Mr. Calloway, Jack Calloway. And no, ma'am, not running. Just passing through. She snorted. They all say that. Room's upstairs. Second on the right. Supper's at 6. Cost extra. The room was small and clean. He walked to the window and pushed aside the faded curtain. Below, the town went about its business. A freight wagon rumbled by. A drunk stumbled out of the saloon. And then he saw her. She was crossing the street, a basket on her arm, moving with a careful grace that screamed she didn't want to be noticed. Her bonnet was pulled forward, hiding her face. But something about the way she held herself, the tension in her shoulders, caught his eye. A group of men outside the barber shop stopped talking as she passed. One of them said something, and the others laughed. Her steps got faster, but she didn't run. She held her head high, a silent defiance in the face of their mockery. Then a gust of wind caught her bonnet, pushing it back. For just a second, Jack saw her face in profile. The right side was perfect. High cheekbone, a determined chin. Then she turned to fix the bonnet, and he saw it, the scar. It was bad, the kind of burn that told a story of terrible pain. But what struck Jack wasn't the scar itself. He'd seen worse. It was how fast she turned away, pulling the bonnet forward, a practiced movement born from years of hiding. One of the men yelled something crude. Her back went rigid. She walked into the store without looking back, and their laughter followed her in. Jack found his hands gripping the window frame. He hadn't been in Redemption Creek for an hour, and he could already read the story. Small towns were cruel to anyone who was different, and this woman was carrying the weight of all that cruelty. It's not your business, he told himself. You're here to rest, work a little, and move on. Getting involved in local drama was a fool's game. He turned from the window. He was a man who had learned not to get attached to people or places. That evening, he learned her name, Margaret Hayworth. Tom Garrett at the store told him her family's ranch, the Hayworth place, was looking for a temporary hand. Fair warning, Garrett said, leaning over the counter. Old Dan Hayworth ain't what he used to be. Took to the bottle after his wife died. Then the accident with his daughter. The ranch is barely holding on. His daughter? Jack kept his voice casual. Margaret used to be the prettiest girl in 3 counties. Then she got mixed up with some traveling man. Fire broke out in their barn. He ran off and left her trapped. Old Dan pulled her out, but, well, the damage was done. Garrett lowered his voice. Just don't stare, if you take my meaning. At supper in the boarding house, her name came up again. The other boarders, a medicine drummer and 2 railroad surveyors, were swapping gossip. Hutchinson's still sniffing around her, the drummer said with a sneer. Can't imagine why. Man's got money, could have any woman he wants. Power, one of the surveyors said. Some men like owning something nobody else wants. A pinched-faced schoolteacher sniffed. The girl brought it on herself, consorting with that man. A cautionary tale about the wages of sin. Jack set his fork down, quietly. Seems to me a burn scar's payment enough for whatever sins a 17-year-old girl might commit. The table fell silent. The schoolteacher flushed red. I merely meant... I know what you meant. Jack's voice was low, but it had an edge to it. A dangerous edge. He learned that from men who killed for a living. How to suggest violence without making a threat. After supper, he went to the porch for a smoke. He saw her again. She was standing outside the telegraph office, reading a message under the light from the window. Even from across the street, Jack could see the slump in her shoulders, the way her hand trembled as she folded the paper. Bad news. She stood there for a long moment, gathering herself. Then she started walking toward the edge of town. Jack found himself following, keeping to the shadows. She went to the small cemetery behind the church. He watched as she knelt by a grave with a simple wooden cross, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He should have left. This was private, but something kept him there. When she finally stood, she turned and saw him. She tensed, ready to run. He touched the brim of his hat. "Evening, miss. Didn't mean to intrude." She studied him, this stranger in worn trail clothes. "You're new in town." "Jack Calloway. Just rode in today." Her voice was full of bitter amusement. "Then you haven't heard the stories yet. Give it a day. Someone will warn you off." "Already heard some. Don't put much stock in gossip." She gave a short, harsh laugh. "Then you're a rare man in Redemption Creek, Mr. Calloway." She moved to pass him, keeping her scarred side turned away. "I hear the Hayworth Ranch might be hiring," he said, not sure why he was pushing it. She stopped. "We can't pay much. Hardly anything, truth be told. Not looking to get rich. Just need work for a week or two before I move on." Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, suspicion. "Most men looking for temporary work go to the bigger spreads. The double K." Jack shrugged. "Most men do a lot of things I don't." She studied him for another long moment, as if she was taking his measure. "Ranch is 5 miles north. Follow the creek. We start at dawn." "I'll be there." She nodded once and walked away, swallowed by the darkness. Jack stood there, wondering what in the hell he was doing. He came here to rest, not get tangled up with a scarred woman in a failing ranch. But he thought of the way she stood at that grave, proud and broken all at once. He thought of the way the town treated her like a disease for the crime of surviving. His own past was full of sins that made a barn fire look like child's play. Maybe that's why he felt a pull. One damaged soul recognizing another. He flicked his cigarette into the dirt. Tomorrow he'd ride out to the Hayworth Ranch. Just for a little while, he told himself. Just until the road called him again. But as he lay in that narrow bed, he kept seeing her face in the moment the wind took her bonnet. Not the scar, but the sheer, raw strength it took to face the world with it every single day. For the first time in a long, long time, Jack Calloway was actually looking forward to tomorrow. But tomorrow brought its own kind of hell. The sandstorm hit just after midnight. It came roaring out of the west like a freight train made of wind and grit. Jack woke up to the sound of shutters banging, the whole boarding house groaning like it was about to be torn apart. Outside his window was just a wall of swirling red dust. By morning the storm was gone, but it left the town buried. Roads were blocked. The town well was fouled with sand and debris. Water, always precious, was now more valuable than gold. Jack spent the morning helping clear Main Street. It was late afternoon when he finally rode out to the Hayworth Ranch. The place was a disaster. Fences were down, the chicken coop was half buried, and the barn was leaning like a drunk. Dan Hayworth was standing in the yard, swaying, a bottle in his hand. "Hell of a storm," he slurred. Margaret came out of the house, her dress already filthy from work. She looked surprised to see him. "Mr. Calloway, I didn't think, with the storm." "Said I'd be here." Jack swung down, taking in the damage. "Where do you need me?" She looked from him to her father, who was muttering to himself. "The animals," she said finally. "The cattle scattered. 3 horses are missing, including our breeding mare. And we need water. The well's fouled." "I'll start with water," Jack said. "Nearest clean source is Skeleton Springs, 8 miles north. It's rough country after a storm." "I'll manage." They worked together, loading empty barrels onto the one wagon that survived. Margaret was stronger than she looked. As they loaded the last barrel, she turned to him, forgetting to hide her scarred side. "Why?" she asked. "Why help us? You don't know us. You've got no stake in this ranch." Jack thought for a moment. "Maybe I've been in enough places where nobody helped to know better." Dan's voice yelled from the barn. "Margaret, where's that damn hammer?" She sighed. "I should go. He gets confused. I'll head for the springs. Be back before dark." "Mr. Calloway, Jack. She hesitated. The road goes through Carson's Canyon. There's been reports of trouble there. Drifters. Be careful. He touched his hat. Always am. The canyon was a narrow pass between two ridges, the kind of place smart men avoid after dark. Jack had his rifle across his lap, his eyes scanning the rocks above. He was halfway through when his horse's ears pricked forward. Trouble? The shot came from his left, sparking off a boulder right next to his head. Jack rolled off the wagon, rifle in hand, as two more shots followed. He landed hard behind a wheel. 2 shooters at least, maybe 3. "Just leave the wagon, friend," a voice called down. "Water's worth good money after that storm. No need for anyone to die." Jack levered around into his rifle. He wasn't about to die for a few barrels of water, but these men sounded like amateurs. "Mister," the voice yelled, "you got 10 seconds to walk away, or we start shooting the horses." Jack made his decision. He fired twice, fast. His shots didn't hit anyone, but they hit the rock right next to the voice, spraying stone fragments. "Son of a... he can shoot!" Another voice, younger, panicked. Jack moved fast, using the wagon for cover, and fired 3 more times. He heard the men scrambling, the clatter of hooves on rock as they ran. He waited 10 minutes, but they were gone. It was full dark when he got back to the ranch. A lantern was lit in the barn. Margaret appeared in the doorway, relief flooding her face. "Thank God. We heard shots from the canyon. I thought..." "Ran into some trouble. Nothing serious." Jack started unhitching the team. The water was safe. They worked together, unloading the barrels. Dan Hayworth was passed out in a pile of hay. "He wasn't always like this," Margaret said softly, looking at her father. "Before Mama died, before the fire, he was the strongest man I knew." "Grief takes people different ways," Jack said. When the barrels were stored, Margaret insisted on cleaning a scrape on Jack's hand he hadn't even noticed. They sat on hay bales, the lantern casting a warm circle of light. "You have a gentle touch," he said. "I've had practice." She gestured vaguely at her face. "People don't want me touching them now. Afraid it might be catching, I suppose." "Their loss." She looked up, searching his face for pity or mockery. She found neither. "Why aren't you afraid," she asked, "of this?" She turned her face fully into the light, letting him see the scar in all its twisted detail. "Everyone else is. They look away or they stare. But you just see it and move on." Jack was quiet. Then he rolled up his left sleeve. A puckered, ugly scar ran from his elbow to his wrist. "A patchy arrow," he said simply. He touched his side where a knife scar still ached in cold weather. "Man lives long enough out here. He collects damage. Yours is just more visible than most." Margaret traced the arrow scar with one finger, her touch as light as a feather. "Does it hurt?" "Sometimes." He rolled his sleeve down. "But I'm still here, still breathing. Can't ask for much more than that." "A woman can't ask for much at all," she said quietly. "Just to be left alone, to not be seen as a cautionary tale, or a last resort for a desperate man like Hutchinson." Her voice turned fierce. "He thinks because no one else wants me, he can have me cheap. I'd rather lose everything than give him that satisfaction." "Good for you." She looked surprised. "Most people say I'm a fool." "Most people are idiots." That startled a laugh out of her. A real, unguarded laugh. For a second, her whole face lit up, and Jack saw the girl she must have been. Then she remembered herself and turned away. "I should check on the horses." He walked with her through the barn. She spoke softly to each animal, her hands gentle and sure. Whatever the fire had taken from her, it hadn't taken her competence. "I'll stay the night," Jack said suddenly. "In the barn, in case those bushwhackers come back." "You don't have to." "You didn't ask. I offered." He found a clean pile of straw. "Won't be the first barn I've slept in." She hesitated, then nodded. "There are blankets in the tack room. And Jack, thank you. For the water. For staying. For treating me like a person. Get some rest, Margaret." She left, and Jack settled into the straw, his rifle close. He could see a light on in the house, where Margaret was probably still working, holding this whole broken place together with sheer will. He told himself he'd help her find the cattle, fix the fences, then he'd move on, like always. But tonight, for the first time in years, Jack Calloway wanted to stay. He kept thinking about her laugh, about scarred hands touching scarred skin, about two broken people finding something like understanding in a barn that smelled of hay and horses, and something that felt a little like hope. The whispers in Redemption Creek started small. The scarred Hayworth girl has a new hired hand. Then they grew. The drifter is staying in her barn. By the third day the story was set. Margaret Hayworth, the town pariah, had taken up with a saddle tramp. Jack rode into town for supplies, and the gossip followed him down Main Street. He'd spent the last 3 days working alongside Margaret. They'd found the scattered cattle, mended the fences. They worked in an easy silence. Two people who understood what needed to be done without having to talk about it. In Garrett's store, Jack heard the voices from the next aisle. Mrs. Pritchard and Mrs. Miller, at it again. Bold as brass, the two of them, Mrs. Pritchard was saying, working side by side like it's proper. That girl has forgotten all shame. What can you expect? Mrs. Miller replied. She's lucky any man will speak to her, even a drifter. Jack set a sack of grain down hard. His jaw was tight. The bell over the door chimed and Samuel Hutchinson walked in. His pale eyes found Jack immediately. Mr. Calloway, the man helping at the Hayworth place. That's right. Admirable charity. Hutchinson's smile was as thin as a razor. Though I wonder if you understand the situation. The Hayworths owe my bank a great deal of money. Anyone who encourages them in their delusion of keeping that ranch is doing them no favors. Seems to me they're doing just fine. Hutchinson stepped closer. That ranch will be mine by the month's end, one way or another. The only question is whether Miss Hayworth comes with it willingly or watches her father get thrown off his land. Jack straightened up, using his height. That sounds like a threat, Mr. Hutchinson. A business proposition, one that doesn't concern drifters just passing through. The banker's eyes were cold as a winter grave. I'd hate for you to get caught up in local matters that might turn unpleasant. I'll keep that in mind. On the ride back, Jack's mood was dark. He'd seen this before. Rich men using debt like a club to beat people down. He was almost back to the ranch when he saw more riders ahead. Jake Morrison and two of his men from the Double K. They blocked the road. Afternoon, Calloway. Morrison's grin was mean. Heard you're keeping company with our local curiosity. The road's public property, Morrison. Move. In a minute. Just thought I should educate you. See, that scar ain't the only thing wrong with her. That girl's already proven she'll lift her skirts for any traveling man who comes along. Jack's movement was a blur. 1 second he was sitting on the wagon, the next he was standing, his Colt in his hand, the barrel centered on Morrison's chest. You want to repeat that? The smirks vanished. Morrison's hand hovered over his own gun, but he froze. There was something in Jack's eyes, a cold flatness that promised death. Easy now, Morrison said. The boys were just funning. Find different fun, Jack said, his voice deadly quiet. The next man who speaks ill of Miss Hayworth in my hearing won't get a warning. He held the gun steady until they wheeled their horses and rode off. When he got back to the ranch, Margaret was in the corral with a skittish mare. She looked up and saw the look on his face. Trouble in town. Nothing worth mentioning. Hutchinson sends his regards. He told her what the banker had said. Her face tightened. He's not wrong about the debt. We have 2 weeks before he can foreclose. You should know that before you waste more time here. He slammed a sack of flour down. Are you trying to run me off? I'm trying to be fair. You've done more for us in 3 days than anyone in this town has done in 3 years. But this isn't your fight. Maybe I'm making it mine. Why? She spun to face him. What possible reason could you have? Because you deserve better. The words came out harsh. He took a breath. Because men like Hutchinson shouldn't always win. Because your father needs help, and you're drowning trying to save this place alone. Her cheeks flushed. I don't need your pity, Jack Calloway. Good, because I'm not offering any. I'm offering help. We're not the same. You're a man. You can ride into any town and make a life. I'm a scarred woman with a drunk father and a failing ranch. No, Jack said quietly. You're stronger than I am. That stopped her. She just stood there searching his face. Dan's voice cut through the moment. "Margaret, where'd you put that whiskey?" She closed her eyes. "I should go." "Let me." Jack found Dan in the kitchen, tearing through the cupboards. "You," the older man slurred. "The drifter. Where's she hidden it?" "Sit down, Dan. Let's talk." "Nothing to talk about. You've been sleeping for 2 days while your daughter holds this place together." Dan's face darkened. "Don't you lecture me, boy. You don't know what I've lost. Your wife, I'm sorry for it, but you still have a daughter who needs you, and you're failing her." "I've already failed her. I failed to protect her from that smooth-talking bastard. I failed to get her out of the fire. Look at her face. That's my failure, written plain for all to see." "That's survival, written plain. She lived, Dan. She's still here, still fighting. What's your excuse?" "Get out of my house." "Sure." Jack stood. "But answer me this. When Hutchinson forecloses and throws you both off this land, when he forces Margaret to choose between the street and his bed, what comfort will that whiskey be then?" He left Dan sitting at the table and found Margaret by the corral. "You shouldn't have done that," she said. "Someone needs to. He's got 2 weeks to decide if he wants to save his ranch or lose it. It's already lost." "Is it?" Jack leaned on the fence beside her. "The cattle are back. The fences are mended. All you need is the money to pay Hutchinson." "With what? We sold everything." "There are other ways to make money." He looked at her. "That breeding mare you lost in the storm, is she valuable? The best bloodline in 3 counties, but she's gone. Or someone picked her up. Someone who knows horses, like those Jackson boys who tried to rob me. I hear they run wild horses up in the breaks." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "You think they have her?" "It's worth checking. A mare like that, the foals would bring good money. The Jacksons aren't known for returning stolen property." Jack smiled, a grim, tight smile. "They're not known for standing up to a real fight either. You're talking about riding into outlaw country for a horse that might not even be there. You got a better idea?" She was quiet. Then her chin lifted. "She's my horse. I can handle her better than anyone. It could be dangerous. My whole life is dangerous, Jack. At least this danger might lead somewhere better." Looking at her, windblown and determined, magnificent in her defiance, Jack felt something shift inside him. For years he'd just been drifting, surviving. But standing next to this woman who refused to break, he saw what it might be like to fight for something. "All right," he said. "We ride at dawn. And Margaret, whatever happens out there, we watch each other's backs." She nodded, and for the first time gave him a real smile that reached her eyes. "Partners, then." "Partners." The word hung between them like a promise. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of fire. Somewhere out there, a lost mare might be waiting to come home, just like Jack was beginning to suspect he was. The news came on a Thursday, carried by Tom Garrett himself. He came rattling up in his wagon, kicking up a cloud of dust. "Federal marshals!" he yelled before he'd even stopped. "They hit a shipment coming down from Denver. It's the Vasquez gang. They're saying the gang's heading this way. There's a gold shipment coming through next week." Margaret came out of the barn. They'd gotten her mare back from the Jackson boys 2 days earlier. It had been a tense standoff, but it ended peacefully. "The Vasquez gang," her face went pale. "They've never come this far south. Wells Fargo is moving 20,000 in gold. I guess that's enough to bring them calling." Garrett looked at them both. "The town's organizing a defense. The sheriff is asking for volunteers." Jack felt Margaret's eyes on him. He hadn't told her everything about his past, but she knew he could handle a gun. "When?" he asked. "Meeting tonight at the church. The shipment comes through in 3 days." After Garrett left, Margaret found Jack in the barn cleaning his weapons. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "The town's been decent enough to me. The town's been watching you like a hawk, waiting for you to cause trouble. Half of them would be happy to see you ride on. What about the other half?" "I don't care about them." The words came out fierce. "I care about—" She stopped, her face flushing. "Just to come back alive, all right? This ranch needs you." He wanted to tell her it wasn't the ranch that would bring him back. Dan Hayworth appeared in the doorway, more sober than Jack had ever seen him. Heard about the Vasquez gang. You really planning to stand with this town? That's the idea. Dan studied him. A man who stands between Vasquez and 20,000 in gold tends to end up dead. Been dead before, Jack said. Didn't take. That got a short bark of a laugh out of the old man. You got sand, Calloway, I'll give you that. Then his face got serious. You watch yourself out there. My daughter, she's had enough loss. That night the church was packed with men. Sheriff Patterson laid it out plain. The most vulnerable spot was Skeleton Canyon, the perfect place for an ambush. I need 12 men, Patterson said. 6 to ride with me. 6 to position themselves in the canyon ahead of time. And fair warning, the Vasquez gang doesn't leave witnesses. Samuel Hutchinson stood up. I'll pledge $100 to any man who volunteers. The bank has a vested interest in this shipment getting through safely. Jake Morrison was next. Count me in. One by one, men volunteered. Jack waited until the end. I'll take one of the canyon positions, he said. Hutchinson's pale eyes fixed on him. How generous of Mr. Calloway to defend our town. One wonders at his motives. A man shouldn't wonder too hard, Jack replied, his voice mild. Might strain something. Back at the ranch, Margaret was waiting on the porch. How many volunteered? Enough. He sat beside her on the steps. Maybe too many. Half those boys have never shot at anything but coyotes. But you have. It wasn't a question. Jack looked up at the stars, memories flickering like ghosts. Yeah, more than I care to remember. Is that why you drift? Trying to forget? Started that way. After a while, it just became what I did. Easier than staying. Easier than getting attached. He glanced at her. Usually. She pulled her shawl tighter. I used to dream about drifting. Before the fire. Just saddling a horse and riding until I found somewhere nobody knew my name. Somewhere I could start clean. Why didn't you? Papa. The ranch. Fear, maybe. She smiled a sad little smile. Turns out you can't run from yourself anyway. The scars follow, inside and out. Maybe it's not about running, Jack said. Maybe it's about finding the right place to stop. Their eyes met in the darkness. Her hand was resting on the step near his, close enough to touch. He covered it with his own. He could feel the calluses from her hard work, the strength in her fingers. Jack, she whispered, after this is over, we'll talk. When I get back, he said, his voice firm, we'll talk about a lot of things. He squeezed her hand. I've got reasons to come back now. The next day passed in a blur of preparation. That evening they sat on the corral fence watching the horses. I've been thinking, Margaret said suddenly, about what you said, finding the right place to stop. Her voice was rushed, nervous. This ranch could be more than it is. With the mare back, we could breed horses, good ones. We could pay off Hutchinson, build something real here. She flushed, but she met his eyes. If you were interested in staying, as a partner, it would be strictly business, of course. Equal shares. Margaret. He waited until she looked at him. After this is over, we'll talk about partnerships. All kinds. Hope bloomed in her eyes. You'd better come back then, Jack Calloway. I don't make offers like that twice. Wouldn't dream of missing it. Tomorrow he'd face a gang of killers for a town that barely tolerated him. But he'd do it gladly, because somewhere in the last few weeks this place had become more than just another stop on the road. It had become a place worth fighting for, and Margaret Hayworth had become someone worth coming home to. The news spread through Redemption Creek like a plague. The scarred Hayworth girl and the drifter. Keeping company. Some said they'd seen them riding together at dawn. Others whispered about finding them alone in the barn after dark. Jack got back 3 days later. The fight with the Vasquez gang had been short and bloody. 2 townsmen were wounded, 3 outlaws were dead. Jack had earned a grudging respect from the men who fought with him, but that respect turned back to suspicion fast. Ain't natural, he heard Jake Morrison saying outside the saloon. A man like that, taken up with a woman whose face could curdle milk. Must be after the ranch, another man said. Old Hayworth's drinking himself to death. Calloway figures to marry the girl and get the land cheap. Jack kept walking. But in Garrett's store, a different kind of trouble was waiting. Samuel Hutchinson stood with the mayor and the reverend. Mr. Calloway. Hutchinson's voice was slick with false concern. We were just discussing the situation at the Hayworth Ranch. An unmarried woman, her father's condition, and now a stranger of questionable character taking liberties. I work for the Hayworths, Jack said, his voice flat. Room and board in exchange for labor. The appearance of impropriety, the Reverend intoned, can be as damaging as the impropriety itself, especially for a woman whose reputation is already compromised. Jack set down the supplies he was holding, very carefully. Gentlemen, he said, his voice low and dangerous, I'm going to say this once. Miss Hayworth is a lady who deserves respect. Any man who suggests otherwise will answer to me. That includes bankers, mayors, and preachers. Are you threatening us? The mayor sputtered. I'm clarifying expectations. Jack's hand rested near his gun. Their troubles are self-inflicted, Hutchinson said. However, I have a solution. The bank is prepared to extend their loan indefinitely if Miss Hayworth accepts my protection, as my wife. Of course, this offer is contingent on certain interferences being removed. You mean me? You did the town a service with the shipment, Calloway, Hutchinson said, his eyes cold. Take the $100 I pledged and ride on, today. And if I don't? The mayor cleared his throat. The town council has broad authority to deal with vagrants and troublemakers. The threat was clear. They were going to run him out of town, one way or another. I'll take it under advisement, Jack said. He left the store and headed for the ranch, his mood black as a storm cloud. The town was closing ranks. He knew how this would end. He found Margaret in the garden, attacking weeds like they were her mortal enemies. He told her what happened. Her face went pale, then red with anger. So I'm to be sold off to save everyone's sensibilities? And you're to be run out of town like a common criminal? She ripped off her gardening gloves. Well, they can all go to hell. I won't do it. I won't marry that snake. They'll make things difficult, Margaret. Let them try. Her chin jutted out. I have survived their whispers for 3 years. What more can they do? Cut off your credit, refuse to buy your stock, starve you out. She was quiet for a moment. There's a town social tomorrow night, celebrating the victory over the Vasquez gang. Everyone will be there. So, her eyes blazed. So we go, together, publicly. If they want to gossip, let's give them something real to talk about. Margaret, that's like throwing gasoline on a fire. Maybe it's time for a fire. I'm tired of hiding, Jack. I'm tired of being ashamed. I am tired of men like Hutchinson thinking they can buy me because no one else would want me. He looked at her, standing there in the dirt, all defiance and stubborn pride. You sure about this? No, she laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. I'm terrified, but I'm more terrified of spending the rest of my life alone because I was too scared to take a chance. That night, they told Dan their plan. The old man was sober, his eyes clear. About time, he said gruffly. Been watching you two dance around each other for weeks. Margaret, your mother would have liked him. He's got backbone. He looked at Jack. You planning to stay? Make an honest woman of her? If she'll have me? I haven't said yes to anything, Margaret protested, but her cheeks were pink. You will, Dan said with certainty. Tomorrow night, you wear your mother's blue dress. Show this town what they've been too blind to see. Later, Jack found her by the corral, brushing the mare by moonlight. Second thoughts? He asked. Third and fourth. But no backing down. They'll be cruel, you know. They're already cruel. At least this way, I'm not alone. He took the brush from her hand. In the moonlight, the scar was just a shadow. He reached out and traced it gently with one finger. She shivered but didn't pull away. You're beautiful, he said, his voice rough. Scar and all. Anyone who can't see that is a fool. Jack, her voice was a whisper. We haven't known each other long. You're just a drifter with a past. She pressed her fingers to his lips. After tomorrow. Say it after tomorrow. When you've seen how they treat me, how they'll treat you for choosing me. If you still want to say it, then. He caught her hand and kissed her palm. I'll still want to say it. They stood there in the moonlight, hands clasped, knowing they were about to step off a cliff together. No man wanted the scarred bride, she whispered, repeating the cruel words like a prayer. This one does, Jack replied firmly, and tomorrow they'll all know it. The town hall was lit up with lanterns. The sound of fiddle music spilled out onto the street. Jack, in a borrowed coat, offered Margaret his arm. She wore her mother's blue dress, her head held high. Ready? He asked. No. She took his arm anyway. But we're doing this. The music stopped the second they walked through the door. 100 conversations died. 100 heads turned. The silence was deafening. Then the whispers started, a low rumble that grew into a wave of sound. The nerve of her, that drifter, shameless. Sheriff Patterson was the first to approach them. Jack, Miss Hayworth, might be easier for everyone if we knew our place. Margaret's voice was steady, but Jack could feel her trembling. If we hid away like proper outcasts? Before the sheriff could answer, Samuel Hutchinson appeared, flanked by the mayor and the reverend. Miss Hayworth. Hutchinson's eyes flicked over her dismissively. Surely you realize what a spectacle you're making. The only unpleasantness here, Mr. Hutchinson, is your assumption that you speak for everyone. Don't I? He gestured at the crowd of staring, judgmental faces. Look around. Do you see welcome? Or do you see what I see? Disgust, pity, embarrassment for your shameless display. You're right, Margaret said, her voice suddenly quiet. I do see disgust, but not at me. At a man who would use debt and threats to force a woman into his bed. I see pity, but not for my scars, for your shriveled soul that finds pleasure in the pain of others. And I see embarrassment, yes, for a town that claims to have Christian charity while practicing nothing but cruelty. Hutchinson's face went dark. You forget yourself. No. Margaret's voice rose, clear and strong, silencing the room. I found myself. For 3 years I have hidden, ashamed of something that wasn't my fault. I let this town make me small. I let you make me believe I was worthless because my face was no longer pretty. She turned, addressing the whole crowd. Yes, I loved unwisely. Yes, I paid for it. But how long must I pay before your righteousness is satisfied? The girl's hysterical, someone muttered. No, Jack said, stepping beside her. She's honest, something this town could use more of. Jake Morrison pushed forward. Nobody asked you, Drifter. Why don't you ride on before something unfortunate happens? The crowd pressed in, the mood turning ugly. Jack's hand drifted toward his gun. Stop! The voice was Dan Hayworth's. He pushed through the crowd, stone-cold sober. You want someone to blame? Blame me. I was too drunk to protect her, too lost in my own grief to help her heal. He faced Hutchinson. You're a vulture circling the wounded. My daughter is worth 10 of you, scar or no scar. Then an old Chinese woman, Mrs. Chen, spoke up. Miss Margaret helped birth my grandson when doctor was drunk. She bring medicine when we sick. Never ask for payment. Good heart more important than pretty face. The Chinaman's opinion hardly matters, Hutchinson started, but other voices cut in. She nursed my boy through fever, a farmer's wife called out. Helped me read my letters, added a young rancher. The town's united front was cracking. Hutchinson sensed it. Regardless, the current situation is unacceptable. An unmarried woman, a drifter of questionable character. Then let's change that, Jack said suddenly. The words came out before he even thought them. He turned to Margaret. Her eyes were wide. Marry me. The room exploded. Someone laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. Hutchinson's face went white with rage. But Jack only saw Margaret. You don't have to do this, she whispered. I'm not doing anything I don't want to do. He took her hands, not caring about the 100 pairs of eyes watching them. I came to this town to rest for a few days and move on. Instead, I found a woman with more courage than most men show in a lifetime. I found work worth doing, a future worth building. He touched her scarred cheek. I found you. And if this town can't see what I see, that's their loss, not ours. All eyes turned to Margaret. Tears were flowing down her cheeks now, but her voice was steady. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you, Jack Calloway. Before anyone could react, He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, right there in front of the whole town. A gasp went through the crowd. When they broke apart, Margaret was flushed but smiling, a real unguarded smile. No man wanted the scarred bride, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, until this one did, and that's all that matters. Hutchinson's face was twisted with fury. You'll regret this, both of you. The bank will call in your loan immediately. No one in this town will do business with you. You'll be outcasts. We already are, Jack said. At least now, we'll be outcasts together. Get out, the mayor yelled, his face red. This is a respectable gathering. Jack offered Margaret his arm. I believe we've made our point. They walked out through the parted crowd, heads held high. As they reached the door, the young rancher called out, Congratulations, Jack! Miss Margaret! A few others echoed him. Not many, but it was a start. Outside in the cool night air, Margaret sagged against him. What have we done? Lit a match under this town's self-righteousness. He held her close. Are you sorry? No, she whispered, her eyes bright with tears and determination. Never. But Jack, they'll make our lives hell. Hutchinson won't stop until he destroys us. Let him try. He kissed her forehead. We're not facing it alone anymore. The attack came 5 days later at dawn. Jack woke to the sound of hoofbeats and the smell of smoke. He grabbed his rifle and ran from the barn. Masked riders were circling the house with torches. The haystack was already a roaring tower of flame. Get out here, Hayworth, a muffled voice shouted. Jack recognized Jake Morrison's build. Time to pay what you owe. There were 8 of them, too many for a straight fight. Margaret appeared on the porch with her father's old shotgun. This is my land, too, she said, her voice shaking but firm. Last warning, Morrison yelled. Clear out now or we burn you out. Jack's answer was a rifle shot that took Morrison's hat clean off his head. The riders scattered, returning fire. Bullets splintered the wood around Jack as he dove behind the water trough. Margaret's shotgun boomed from the porch, but they were outnumbered, surrounded. Jack saw a rider preparing to torch the barn, where the horses were trapped. He couldn't cover everything at once. They were going to lose. Then from the darkness, more gunfire erupted. Not at them, at the riders. Tom Bridger, the young rancher, burst out of the trees, his rifle blazing, and behind him, unbelievably, were the Jackson boys, whooping and shooting. Thought you might need some help, Bridger yelled. Caught in a crossfire, the masked riders broke and fled. As the dust settled, Jack looked at their allies in amazement. There was Bridger, the Jacksons, 2 other farmers, and even Doc Hanson. How did you know? Margaret asked. Mrs. Chen, Bridger explained. She heard Morrison recruiting guns yesterday. Figured they'd hit you at dawn. A coward's hour. Wade Jackson grinned. Couldn't let them burn out the only folks who ever treated us decent. You helped us when the bank took our land. Time to return the favor. The whole town's not against you, Doc Hanson added. Just the loud ones with money. The rest of us remember who helped when helping mattered. Just as the sun was rising, Sheriff Patterson rode up. Got reports of gunfire, he said, his face grim. Just some masked riders who attacked us, Jack said. Though they did drop this. He held up Morrison's distinctive hat. The sheriff's jaw tightened. Can't arrest a man for losing his hat, but I can't arrest you for defending yourselves either. He looked at them. And Jack, I'd suggest you and Miss Hayworth make that union legal. Real quick, it's a lot harder to run off a married couple. After the others left, Margaret stood in the yard overwhelmed. I never knew. I thought the whole town hated me. The whole town doesn't know you, Jack said gently. But the quiet parts, the working parts, they see who you really are. Dan came out of the house, sober, carrying his old army revolver. Well, that's torn it. Hutchinson won't back down now. This becomes a real fight. He was right. By noon, word came. Hutchinson had called in the loan. They had 24 hours to pay in full, or the sheriff would evict them. But something had shifted in Redemption Creek. The attack had been too much. Tom Garrett extended them credit. The blacksmith offered to shoe their horses for free. Small acts of defiance. That afternoon, the Reverend arrived, alone. I come seeking forgiveness, he said, removing his hat. I stood with those who cast stones. I was wrong. Miss Hayworth, you showed more Christianity than I did. I would be honored to perform a wedding today and to stand with you tomorrow when Hutchinson comes calling. They were married that evening in the ranch yard. Margaret wore her mother's dress. Jack had never seen anything more beautiful than her smile when she said, I do. Mrs. Chen brought food. The Jackson boys stood guard. Other town folk drifted by, leaving small gifts. Ammunition, preserved fruit, a few precious dollars. Not everyone, but enough. As night fell, Jack and Margaret stood together on their porch. Theirs. Tomorrow, Hutchinson would come with the sheriff and a piece of paper. Tomorrow they could still lose everything. Scared? Jack asked. Terrified, she admitted, but not sorry. Whatever happens tomorrow, we faced it standing up. Mrs. Calloway, Jack said, testing the name. Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Jack stood with their allies as the dust clouds on the horizon announced Hutchinson's approach. Beside him, Margaret held her head high, the morning sun turning her scar into a badge of honor. Here they come, Dan said quietly. Whatever happens, I'm proud of you both. The dust clouds grew larger. The final stand was at hand. But Jack looked at his wife, his brave, scarred, magnificent wife, and knew they had already won the only battle that truly mattered. They had chosen each other. And in the end, love was the strongest rebellion of all. Thank you for listening to this Wild West love story. Where are you enjoying this tale from? Please subscribe to From Wild West channel and share your thoughts below. We'd love to hear what touched your heart in Jack and Margaret's journey.